Well, first of all, I'm honored to be part of the list of speakers here. Boy, listen to everybody today. I'm not sure I can measure up, but listen to, well, first of all, my wife, Tammy, is here in the back. If you would wave, there we go. Certainly my partner in crime as well. Listening to Ben introduce himself, I think that Ben and Denise are our heroes. We want to grow up to be like them. Retire and focus on our farming. I do? Oh, okay. Maybe you don't. All right. You know, and Luke made the comment about he was excited about having a chance to present here and being asked by Gabe. I got the call from Dr. Roundtree last year and thought that was an exciting thing up until about a week ago as well, and then the panic set in. But I do want to be a banana eater. I'm looking forward to getting to the banana eating hat, right? Blaine did a great job talking about marketing, and I can attest to the fact that just adding more kids to the family doesn't necessarily increase the labor force. I like the comment, you guys probably hear this once in a while too with your farms, when you have a friend in the city and they say, boy, I ought to send my kids out to work on your farm so they can learn how to work. And my comment is, if you haven't taught them how to work yet, don't send them to me. And then Josh talked a bit about the different groups. There was the ones that blurted out the answers whether they knew it or not, and then the ones that didn't talk at all. I'm wondering which group the folks who didn't follow the paper instructions fit into. You know, the ones that didn't crumple their paper, they just left it sit in front of them. That had to be a group as well. Anyway, so I'm here I started in grass-fed beef a few years ago, started out as a cash crop farmer years ago, and am just here to share my story. Hopefully, you know, you can gain some insight from it. Certainly, I am not an expert. I don't claim to be an expert. I claim to be really the guy who wants to go out and grab that banana and eat it. I want to be involved. I'm not, again, I'm not the expert. So here's the picture here on the first page. This kind of shows the epitome of what we came from and where we went to. We started out, we were cash crop farming. We had all the big equipment. I am a part-time farmer. I've worked full-time off the farm to support my addiction or my habit or whatever you want to call it. Several years ago, we switched to raising cattle instead, and I'll tell you how we went about doing that. This is my Facebook page. One of my boys, we've got 5 boys. One of my boys is into building websites. He's got a business for doing that, and so he's involved in the business that way. He helped us build this website. I think I said it was a Facebook page. It's not a Facebook page. This is our website. We also have a Facebook page. My wife does a great job of keeping that up. So when we started out, I think this is what we felt like. There's an awful lot of information. There's an awful lot of expertise out there. There's a lot of different ways we need to go today, right? I need to be keeping track of my stocking density and of my how many pounds of forage per acre I'm growing each day, and how many cow days I have, and you know, what's my profit per animal, what's my profit per acre, what's my bottom line. So many different ways to go. The challenge is, you know, which one do you do first? So here's a little bit of the agenda of what we'll talk about. Why do we do this? Why did we switch to grass-fed beef? Why do we even farm in the first place? A little bit of my history. Our farm here in Michigan, we're about 30 miles east of here in Hope, Michigan, as well as my history in farming. Why do we transition from cash crops? What is our current operation? I'll show you what we're doing today, the transition steps to get from cash crop to what we are doing today. And then just ideas. Here's things that I've thought about, or here's things that I've learned. Here's things to consider along the way. Why do we farm? We enjoy being out of the city. We enjoy having the space in the country. We enjoy just the peaceful atmosphere. Like I said, we've got 5 going. We've actually got 6 kids. I shouldn't discount the fact we've got a daughter too. She's the oldest of the bunch, and then we've got 5 boys. The youngest graduated this year from high school, and boy, being out in the country is a great place to raise boys. We didn't have to worry about them being off somewhere else in the city getting into trouble. They had to rely on us as they were growing up to take them into town. It wasn't something they could just walk off on their own. And we were able to provide an awful lot of things to do. You know, they were building forts out in the woods. They had their dirt bikes and their 4-wheelers. You know, I remember the day my son asked to borrow the backhoe for a little bit, and he wanted to go out and build some jumps for his dirt bike at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I forgot all about him. 4 o'clock, he comes driving back into the yard, and I said, "Where have you been?" "Well, building dirt bike jumps." And we went out and looked at them, and here's jumps that are 8 feet high, you know. He and his friends get my wife to lay down in between the 2 ramps on the jump and take their picture as they're going across the top. All kinds of stories like that. Great place to raise those boys. We really enjoyed that. This is a picture of our family reunion that we had in July of this year. We were fortunate enough to have our family from pretty much all over the U.S., as well as one family from Sweden came to our place, and we had a great time for a week. We enjoy being able to have that out in the country. Also, producing healthy food. We are into eating healthy. We really do feel that the food we eat affects our life, how much energy we have, how we feel, our medical condition, and we want to be able to provide that not only for ourselves but also for other people. So what's my history? I grew up on a small dairy farm in central Wisconsin. We were milking about 50 cows. My dad and my uncle pretty much ran the farm, and my brother and I worked there and learned pretty quickly how demanding milking cows can be on a small farm. I remember growing up, we rarely ever missed the milking. My dad, I think when I was maybe early in high school, started taking one Sunday evening milking off per month. We milked twice a day, and my brother and I were expected to be over there helping for a lot of those chores as well. Certainly very demanding, but enjoyed working with cattle, enjoyed being outside, enjoyed, just like I'm sure many of you enjoyed that outdoor lifestyle. After high school, I went to college in Minneapolis and got an engineering degree. Realized I wanted to keep farming, but also that maybe I wanted an outside career to help support that and reduce my dependence at least on dairy farming. And so got my degree in engineering, came over to Michigan. My goal when I got out of college was to work for a growing company in a small enough community where I could drive less than a half hour to work and still have a hobby farm. And I'm living my dream. We live, like I said, 30 miles east of here. I work for Dow Corning. I drive 20 minutes each way to get to work, and we're really enjoying it. At Dow Corning, I've been there for 26 years. I've had roles in production, in designing a new production facility and building a new production facility, starting it up, maintaining it, led a shop team for a while at the plant, and then transitioned to the commercial side, have had roles in sales and market development, technical support, marketing, things like that. And we bought our current farm in 2000. When we bought the farm, it was 200 acres. We've since added 20 acres to that. And at that time, it was a cash crop farm. We just continued operating as a cash crop farm. In 2010, near the end of 2010, one of my boys who had been probably the most involved in the farming with me left to go to school. And I remember in late November sitting in the combine, 10 o'clock at night, dark out, looking at the house, the lights are on, the family's busy in the house, and here I am sitting in the combine. And I thought, do I really want to do this for the rest of my life? Is there a better way? And that's when I sent an email to Dr. Rountree and said, is there a possibility to cash flow my land payments, grazing cattle instead of cash cropping? And he said, absolutely. That's when we started the transition. This is a picture of our buildings, and this one is a little old. It's before we had any cattle. You aren't seeing any cattle around the farm there, but that's kind of what our place looks like. We have 270 acres that we're farming. 220 of it, actually, I'll show you another picture right here. Everything inside the green line is the land that we own. We have 200 acres on one side of Stark Road, and then we have 20 acres across the road. As well, we rent another 70 acres or so. Everything, or most of our cleared land that we own is fenced in for pasture. And then our rented land is where we harvest hay. We would like to graze there on some of the rented land, possibly in the future. For my job right now, I do travel some, so it makes it difficult. It's difficult enough to have cattle at home, but just having cattle in remote locations wouldn't probably work well with me traveling. Also, I am located in a cash crop area, and so landowners aren't familiar with having cattle on their land. There's resistance to that for now. I've started working on them a little bit. What do you think of someday putting some cattle over here, fencing it in? Hopefully we'll get to that, but we aren't there yet. All right. So a little bit more on our current operation. Again, we have 200 acres that are fenced in pasture. We've got high tensile steel wire around the outside as well as for interior fencing. I'll go into a little bit more detail on that later on. We've got 70 acres of rented ground for hay production. We do harvest all of the hay that we use for our winter months. And certainly listening to the speakers and talking to the experts here this week, as well as, in the past, we want to continually extend our grazing season and reduce the amount of time that we're feeding stored forage, but certainly we do need some for now. Not sure exactly where that will go, but we'll continue trying to extend that grazing season. In the winter, we bale graze on our paddocks, and we do that bale grazing on different paddocks each year for a couple of reasons. We want to spread the nutrients, the manure, over the paddock, and by bale grazing we're able to spread that without having to come in and use a manure spreader and mechanically spread it. And then we move from paddock to paddock to make sure we uniformly fertilize over the course of several years. We have 55 cow-calf pairs this year. We are headed towards Red Angus. We've bought some of the females from the Lake City farm. We've got a bull that that Dr. Roundtree bought when he bought the 5L cattle. I didn't actually buy it from MSU or from Dr. Roundtree. It kind of went through a couple other channels, but ended up at my place. We also have genetics from Kit Farrell. I'm sure some of you are familiar with the Farrell cattle, and then also have cooperating producers that I work with. I buy feeder cattle from them, and they have the Farrell genetics. As well, we have some Black Angus, as you saw in the cattle herd at Lake City yesterday, we have both Red Angus and Black Angus as well. Some Shorthorn influence. Several years ago I had a Shorthorn bull. I think we've got a little bit of Hereford in there, and maybe even some Simmental, a little bit of a mix of everything. We've got 30 heifers that we have in with the cows and the bulls right now for breeding, and then 50 finishing animals, and 5 bulls. Okay, back to our layout. I'm not sure do I have a pointer here? Maybe not. So I'll describe it. The green lines are the perimeter fence, and perimeter fence for us is 5 wires of high tensile steel. We use plastic line posts. As I was thinking or studying fence, one of my most frustrating jobs when I was a kid was to go out and find that insulator that was broken with steel line posts and then an insulator on it. Just from my engineering side, it just didn't seem to make sense. And so we found a source for plastic posts. We use those for line posts. Our corner posts, we use a single 6-inch wood post that's 12 feet long, and we pound it 7.5 feet down in the ground. Rather than having the support mechanism around the corner, we use that single post. So far we've had good luck with it. Probably the longest length of fence that we've stretched around it is about 3/4 of a mile. And after 3 years, we haven't had any that have started to tip at all or anything like that. So we use high tensile wire, 5 wires of high tensile around the outside. The blue lines that you see are my interior fences to divide up paddocks. Those are single wire, high tensile again. We've got, I think it ends up being 21 paddocks. Maybe it's a little less than that. You can count them up. We put the numbers you see, S1, S2, S3, and then N1, N2, N3. We put numbers on them just so that when we talk about the paddocks, we know which one it is. What else can I describe? Oh, our water system. So we have both underground and above ground water. The dashed yellow line is underground water lines, and the way I put those in, I have again, networking is so important in this business. I have a friend who has a underground boring machine, and he's put in probably 3,000 feet of underground water line for me. All of those dash lines were bored. And then we have hydrants at the end points of those dash lines. The red lines are above ground water lines. Those connect to the ovals are water tanks. We've got water tanks, one for each paddock with a float valve on it. So ideally, We turn on the water in the spring when the chance of frost is over. All the tanks stay full. They never run over. Cattle never step on the pipe and break the connection. And we just sit in the house and watch. Well, it doesn't quite work like that. In fact, Tuesday afternoon before I came over here, I went out and checked on the cows just to make sure everything was okay. And they had stepped on a water line and broken off a plastic coupling, and so hurried up and moved them to a different pasture and shut off that water line. You know, we're still trying to figure out just exactly what the best system is. One thing we have learned, 100-gallon plastic water tanks with 100 cows on it is not big enough, and those cows will tear that tank to shreds in no time. We have switched this year to I got a bunch of these 1,100-gallon fuel tanks, the horizontal cylindrical fuel tanks. Over the winter, I cut them in half and then built kind of a stand for them so they wouldn't rock too much on the ground. And they seem to hold up pretty well. We get 500 gallons of water in there, and the cattle don't drink it unless we break a water line. The cattle don't drink it fast enough where the tank gets light enough and they can move it around and then pull it away from the pipe. Now, if there's a broken water line or for some reason water's off, that's a different story. But certainly those bigger tanks and heavier tanks are much more robust. Okay, then there's two triangles there, two blue triangles. Those are frost-free waters. We've got one right up by the barn, and then we've got one actually across the ditch. There's a ditch there that you can see. And those are the waters that we used in the winter. In the winter, we try to have no more than 2 groups of cattle and one on each of those frost-free waters. The one that isn't by the barn is one that we put in last fall. Great water, although it's one of those underground ones. Sinks down the ground, 24-inch pipe, and then with a water line coming up underneath it. And when it got wet, middle of the summer, we got a lot of rain, cattle start stamping on the ground, and that thing just started rising out of the ground. It was a foot out of the ground when we put it in, and right now I bet it's 3.5 feet out of the ground. Not exactly sure what happened, but my theory is, and we're going to dig it up here in the next few weeks and figure it out, but my theory is that it acted like trying to hold a balloon under the water. There was an air pocket in there. When the ground got wet and the cattle started stamping on it, it allowed the water to go down the ground, and then that bubble underneath the water just started floating it up. We'll see if I'm right or not, and then we'll try to figure out how to mitigate that. So that's what our place looks like. Am I forgetting anything? I think I got it pretty well. So a little bit more about our grazing operation right now. We are at about 1 animal unit per acre. I already described what our animal groups are made up of. This past summer, 2015, we did move cattle daily, kind of as an experiment. Prior to that, we were moving maybe every 3 to 5 days. Certainly, well, it's been a good summer for grass anyway here, so I don't know that we can take all the credit for daily moves, but I definitely think that moving daily was a valuable thing to do. Now we got to sit down. I did hire somebody to do that moving. Now I got to sit down and run the economics and run the numbers and see was it worth the cost, was the benefit worth the cost. We are grazing, basically we start grazing, some years we're able to start around the beginning of May, usually for sure by the 15th of May we can get cattle out on grass, and this year I expect we'll get to at least mid-November grazing. We do put out a little bit of dry hay before then. I'm actually putting out a bale or two of dry hay every once in a while now, and in fact we do that throughout the summer as well. But we won't start feeding full full feeding bales until mid-November, hopefully maybe even early December. When we do, I already talked about bale grazing in the paddocks. When we do all of our feeding, we bale graze in the paddocks. One of the things our cattle are not in the barn at all, including our finishing cattle. We don't take them inside. We don't finish them in confinement or anything like that. I know there's plenty of schools of thought around whether or not that's good or whether it's good or not, but our operation is to keep the cattle outdoors all the time. So that's my production, our production operation. Then the next step is the processors. We visited Graham's yesterday. We use Graham's for some of our processing. We are not able to get in there as often as we want. Graham's, as they described yesterday, they are booked solid and could certainly use more capacity. So we use several other processors. We also use custom exempt processors when we're marketing direct to customers, quarters, halves, or wholes, things like that. And marketing and sales, we sell direct to customers. This year, we'll sell about 50 animals, and I would say 15 to 20 will go to direct customers, and then the rest will go to a distributor. Bill Taylor is here from Eat Local, Eat Natural, and he is the one who distributes all of those other animals. And I guess, maybe a little bit around how we got to that sales model. We started producing cattle, as we increased our numbers and realized that we were getting to the point where we couldn't sell them all direct to customers, just started talking to some distributors, and again through networking. I think I met Bill through Joe Collin, and again, so important to have the network, be talking to folks, talk about your story, talk about your product. What are you selling? What do you have available? And maybe you don't need those folks right now, but maybe sometime in the future you need them. All right. So how did we start? Why did we leave cash cropping and go to grass-fed beef? Again, like I said, I was sitting in the combine and thought there's got to be a better way. I don't necessarily enjoy owning lots of equipment, fixing lots of equipment, spending all my time sitting in a tractor seat by myself. And those were the things that started me thinking about grazing and cattle. Traded emails with Dr. Roundtree. At the same time, I don't know if you guys have heard of CrossFit. CrossFit is an international exercise organization. My wife and I started working out at a CrossFit facility. And when some of the members found out that we had a farm and we had a couple head of cattle, they said, "Oh, is it grass-fed?" And I said, "Well, no, but it's grain-fed, it's good stuff." And they said, "Oh, no, there's definitely a difference. Do your research." And so I started doing my research and realized that there were certainly perceived health benefits. I personally believe there are health benefits, but more importantly for what we were doing, there was consumers out there that believed in the health benefits of grass-fed versus grain-fed. And as part of the research, any good market development program is looking for a segment in the marketplace that had demand but not supply. Well, there was lots of demand for that grass-fed beef, but there wasn't the supply. So I thought, that's certainly something that I would enjoy doing. It matches with where I want to go. So we, over the course of 6 months or so, we decided we're going to move our whole operation over to that. When we were cash cropping about 400 acres. We decided we were going to transition the whole thing over to grass-fed beef and got started on that. We attended an awful lot of educational conferences, did a lot of networking with academia, producers, customers, verify that market. I remember meeting with the folks down at Eastern Market in Detroit. Certainly worked with the MSU extension folks and was up at the Lake City facility often and tried to do as much research as possible to make sure this was really something worth getting into. 2013, I went to the Grassfed Exchange in Bismarck and, validated that there certainly is a lot of folks interested in this, getting involved in this, and a lot further along than I was in it. Developed a network of like-minded comrades resulting in great friendships. I mean, I've learned an awful lot. I feel like I've been enriched educationally, but I've made some awful good friends too. There's folks I communicate with daily as friends as well as educational support. We've developed a users group called 3G. That's the Gladwin Grazers Network. Gladwin, Michigan is a place, 45 minutes from here or so. And we just got together, got a group of grazers together. We're all kind of doing the same thing to compare ideas at the suggestion of Ben and Denise. I don't remember where that originally started. Maybe it was at a Northern Michigan Farm Conference or something, but I remember them saying, how about the idea of getting together and working as a group and comparing ideas and helping each other. And now we get together every once in a while to share how the year has gone and what's been the challenges and encourage each other. Just as importantly as the emails that go back and forth outside of those meetings to help each other. Networking is so important. I think Blaine talked about that a little bit too. It's kind of isolating and you feel like you're beating your head against the wall until you meet up with somebody else that's doing the same sort of thing and you say, hey, you're going through the same thing, I'll help you, we'll work together, share the pain and share the excitement. And life is a lot easier that way, a lot funner. So in 2011, we started making the transition. We bought a few cattle from friends and neighbors. As there was a few cattle for sale, I'd buy them. Planted 20 acres of pasture and started rotational grazing on that 20 acres. And I remember when we first started out, I put up one wire of electric fence. It wasn't high tensile steel. My wife is shaking her head back there, and I don't blame her a bit now that we've got that 5 wires up. I'm amazed that I left on trips for 3 or 4 days at a time for Dow Corning, and there's 30, 40 cattle on a single hot wire in the middle of the winter. But we survived. Occasionally they got out, I think. I'm getting the evil eye over there. But now with 5 wires, they're doing a whole lot better. So we developed our fencing plan and our water system. I described the water system a bit. Here's the fencing, kind of a good indication of the fencing. We've got 5 wires of high tensile steel, single corner post. Actually, that corner post is supporting wire for about 3/4 of a mile. We've got our line posts. We've got plastic line posts every, it's going to be about every 50 feet. 50 to 60 feet. And maybe if in the future I put up perimeter fence, it wouldn't be 5 wires. It might be 4 or 3 wires. Our paddocks are 300 feet wide. If you remember from the mat, we do the paddocks 300 feet wide, and then when we're moving cattle every day, we don't give them access to that whole paddock. We give them access to the water tank, and then we put perpendicular temporary wires, the reels with step-in posts, and give them enough access to enough forage for one day. And then we start moving away from the water tank daily until we get to the back of that paddock, and then we'll come back up to the water tank and move the other way, and then rotate paddock to paddock. When I started, we weaned it in the fall. This past year, we weaned in March instead. So here's the next few years. Kept adding fence and cattle. 2013 is the first year when we didn't have any cash crops anymore. We were completely into either hay ground or pasture ground. Then 2014, we added that second frost-free water out in the pasture. When I was cash cropping, I had a soil consultant who would do soil samples every other year on my place. He kept doing them after we moved to the pasturing. And just an interesting change in the land. From 2010 to 2014, and actually really that was only about 3 years of pasturing, our organic matter increased by 25% in the areas that were pastured for those 3 years. And we had a 12% increase in the amount of nitrogen available to the plants. What Ben was talking about earlier certainly did seem to make sense with what's going on in our pastures. Okay. Another cool sign picture. Sometimes it's hard to know which way to go. So financial side, when we were making the transition financially, I'll tell you right now that I think maybe I made the transition a little bit too quickly. We created some of you saw my condensed financial presentation last night. We do keep track of cash flow on a spreadsheet by month, working hard to keep that positive. Sometimes it's certainly not, but at least keeping track of everything that's going on financially. You make the plan and then you adjust the plan, right? You can't ever expect that it's always going to fit according to the plan. There's always going to be changes. And like I told one of my boys, I don't know, we were having a conversation earlier this year, and he was talking about how some of his friends seemed like they were always in a financial emergency. You know, the car broke down. Oh, that's an emergency. I don't have any money to fix the car. School bills are due. Well, what I talked to him about is you aren't necessarily going to eliminate the emergencies, but planning helps reduce the impact of those emergencies. You know, if you're putting together a forward plan and a forward budget, it isn't going to eliminate the things you don't expect, but at least you can look at that and say, okay, how can I adjust the plan for this year to cover for that thing that went wrong that I didn't expect? So I really believe in the importance of putting together a plan, not only for the things you're going to do, you know, building fence, putting in a water system, buying cattle, but also where's the money going to come from? And, you know, prioritizing. That first, the first sign there with the arrows pointing everywhere, you know, it's easy to feel like I got to do all this stuff right now. But in reality, we can't do everything right now. We can't afford to hire people to do everything right now. You've got to prioritize what's the most important, you know, what can I accomplish? And yet, as speakers have talked, maintain the lifestyle that you want. You know, you could easily just get buried in your farming operation. I tend to do that. I've got to back off every once in a while and realize there's got to be a life outside of farming, otherwise there's no sense in farming. Farming for profit is much more enjoyable than farming for loss. I've learned that. Know your cost of production. How much does it cost you to produce that steer? Dr. Roundtree put up a great spreadsheet yesterday listing all the costs for raising a steer and then the profit at the bottom of that. I've taken that spreadsheet that he had and then just kind of adapted it for my stuff. I'll show you a snapshot of it, but know your cost of production. If your cost of production is negative, you're better off producing 10 steers than 100, right? We got to keep it positive. We got to keep that cost of production, the profit positive. And then create a balance sheet. I do it every December at the end of every year, a balance sheet of what's the financial snapshot of your operation. What do you own? What's your assets? What's your liabilities? How much money do you owe? And then what's your net worth? And did it go up from last year? Is it going up? Is it trending up over time? Or is it trending down? If it's trending down, boy, you stop it before it bleeds out. Stop the bleeding. So here's an example, or here's my spreadsheet for cash flow. Certainly your numbers are going to be different than my numbers. This is the expenses side of it. So every month I'm keeping track of expenses. You can see on the bottom I have tabs for each year, and I carry, when there's carryover from one year to the next, I make sure it transfers. And then here's the income portion, or the revenue portion, as well as cattle born or cattle brought onto the farm. This is the cost of production. So this is basically the spreadsheet that Dr. Roundtree had up last night at the financial meeting, and keeping track of your expenses. I've also, on the right-hand side, kept track of what does it cost me to produce hay. And there it comes out to about $80 a ton. I would charge myself a little bit more than that. And then this is the balance sheet. It's hard to see the categories on the side, but basically I keep track of assets, liabilities in all the different categories, and then what's the payments? What are the monthly payments on those things? Okay, what's the marketing and supply chain and sales part of the transition? So first of all, we had to define what was the product that we wanted to produce. And how do you define that? The description of grass-fed beef has an awful lot there's a lot of variety in that description. There's a grass-fed certification that you can get, and that's got a certain protocol. Seven Sons has their protocol for grass-fed. Eat Local, Eat Natural has theirs. Cherry Capital has theirs. There's a lot of different protocols for grass-fed. So what I did is talk to potential customers, talk to direct customers, and then my wife and I talked about what do we want to do with our operation, and then we came up with our description. Grass-fed from birth to finish. Our cattle don't eat grain at all. That's mothers, bulls, calves, finishing. None of them have grain. Our goal is to be GMO free. On the pasture, we want them on pasture as much as possible. There's customers that value that. To say that's the best way or it's healthier for the animals, I'm not here to judge that one, but we certainly have customers that are asking, are these cattle on pasture all of their life. So we decided to be pasture raised. Stayed away from antibiotics and growth hormones. We want to produce a healthy and wholesome product. So once we define the product, then we define the potential markets. Who's going to buy this stuff? Distributors, customers, we've talked about that some already. Talked with them, made sure that our model aligned with what they were looking for. And then, another important part is, do they want fresh beef or do they want frozen beef? Certainly, it's easier to handle the annual change, the yearly change in supply, being able to freeze it, but then certainly there's some customers that want it fresh. That's a little more of a challenge if they want it year-round. And then, are they looking for a quarter in the fall, or are they looking for a couple pounds of hamburger and some steaks every week? And how do you accommodate that? Just like Blaine said, making it convenient. How do you provide what they want? If our job as producers is to meet the customer's demand, and then match the timing of the supply to the demand. Advertising, how are you going to get the word to the potential customers? Like I said earlier, we set up a website. My son did that for us. Word of mouth. Probably the most important method to advertise is word of mouth. That's how you build your reputation. When you have satisfied customers and they tell their friends, then you can build your customer base. Social media. I'll right now claim that I am not a social media guy, but I also understand how important social media is. My wife does a great job of taking care of that for us. People do connect with our farm through social media. The other thing I guess that I don't have up there is just being open to people coming to the farm. People do want to come and see what the farm life is like. They want to see where the cattle are. I remember taking one couple out for a walk they came and got some beef from our house. They were from the city. And I was working outside and talking with them for a while, and they were asking all kinds of questions about the cattle. And I said, hey, you want to go for a walk in the pasture? And they said, wow, can we do that? And it was just, it was an experience they had never even dreamed of. And they were so excited about it. We want to be open to that. We want to sell, we want to tell our story. We want to sell what the life we're living. And then create literature, have a price sheet. Let people know what you have for sale, how they can buy it, what it costs. Let them plan. And then put together your story. Each of us has a story to tell. I think Wayne talked about it earlier today when in the morning. Everybody could be up here telling their story. Put that story down. Spend a minute and write it down on paper so that when somebody comes and talks to you, you can share your story. And what I tell people also is have that elevator speech. If you've got 30 seconds with a potential customer, what are you going to say? What are you going to say? Have that elevator speech. They say, if you get in my day job at Dow Corning, I do some sales, and they say if you get in an elevator on the ground floor and you have until the 4th floor to tell the CEO of your biggest potential customer about your business, what are you going to say? In that 30 seconds. So put that down. Why should you trust me to supply food to you? Have some photos. Here we got a photo of one of my baleage tubes. This one actually has about 350 bales in it, so it's almost a quarter mile long. My neighbors call it the deer trap. It changes the flow of deer from the woods on the right-hand side of the picture to the field on the left-hand side. So my ideas, do your research before you start. Spend time planning, don't just jump in. Put together a plan and then work your plan and be willing to change it. Develop a good network of like-minded comrades. Don't be afraid to share what you're thinking and receive criticism on it. I'll tell you, when I had a pasture walk at our place several years ago, and it was a great experience, a great chance to show things off, but I also heard everybody's advice on what I was doing wrong and what I could do better. It took me a minute. I had to get through that rejection for just a little bit and then realize, that was really valuable input, and I can learn from it, I can improve from it. Don't be afraid to hear negative comments and learn from them. Be humble enough to admit failure and try again. Don't hide it. Don't give up. If somebody's going to criticize you for doing something wrong, under the pretense that they've never done something wrong, you need to find a different group of friends to hang out with. And know your cost of production. Identify your strengths and weaknesses and find people to shore up your weaknesses. Don't try to do everything, but make sure everything gets done. If you don't enjoy building spreadsheets, find somebody who does. Sometimes you can do things for less cost. Sometimes it's cheaper to hire somebody else. And I've proven that. Understand what you're selling and what your customers value. Don't try to force them to buy what you have available. Make available what they want. Cooperate with others. Work together to be more cost-effective and efficient. Trying to work on your own is not only lonely and unenjoyable, but you can be a lot more efficient when you work with others. My learnings along the way: don't skimp when you're buying an electric fencer. You can skimp on a lot of other stuff, but that electric fencer is worth putting money into. Hotter the better. I already talked about plastic posts and the water tanks. Work smarter, not necessarily harder. You don't have to be the hardest worker, but you're going to win when you're the smartest worker. Don't let people discourage you. Hang out with people that encourage you. Hang out with people, with the monkeys that encourage you to grab that banana and eat it. Don't hang out with those ones that are going to beat you down. Have long-range goals and action plans to get there. Adjust them as you go. Prioritize your activities. Don't try to do everything at once. We talked about that. Just because everyone else has always done it that way doesn't mean it's the best way to do it. Things will go wrong. The better your plan, the less emergency that will create. Oh, so my questions are along the way. How should I regenerate hay ground? And I've learned a lot about this just in the last couple days. I've got some hay ground that needs to get transitioned. I'm learning about that. High energy annuals, learning about that. Right soil amendment program, that's things we've talked about here. I'm thinking maybe a lot of my questions got answered here in the last couple days. Can hay processed through cattle completely replace other fertilizers? I was on a farm, and then the last one there, I was in Sweden in August of this year and talked to a grass-fed farmer there who said that he sells all of his steers at about 2 years old, and all of his heifers, he breeds them twice and sells them after the second calf. And he said that his customers prefer those females and the quality of the female meat above the steers. Just something to think about. Here we go, another road sign. Which way do we go? And that's all I got. Thank you for your time.